I'm your host for today. I'm Don Haas, the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution. And I am going to restart my computer and hand off the hosting to my colleague, Ingrid Zabel, who can introduce herself.
Hello.
I can find her in the...
I'm Ingrid. I'm a colleague of Don's here at the Paleontological Research Institution. And my title is Climate Change Education Manager. So I work in education and outreach here, and my focus is climate change and energy. And on to Rob.
Okay. My name is Rob Ross. I'm Associate Director for Outreach at the Paleontological Research Institution. So for those of you who are coming from a distance, who don't know what that is, we are a natural history museum in central New York, in Ithaca, New York, affiliated with Cornell University. And although it sounds very narrow to talk about an institution devoted to paleontology, in fact, our outreach efforts are quite broad. So basically earth and environmental sciences. And PRI is just now celebrating its 90th anniversary. It has one of the largest research collections of fossils in North America, and has been producing technical publications and scientific research for that whole time. But we also have a natural history museum called the Museum of the Earth, and a nature center called the Cayuga Nature Center, which are also based here in Ithaca. And in our communities, that's how most people know us. But we do all kinds of outreach, from museum-based stuff to these kinds of workshops and producing materials online. And so this is one example of the kind of thing that we offer. And Don, are you still there?
I am still here. I'm still trying to restart, and I'll suggest that maybe you could show the video that's a little bit further down the agenda while I'm restarting, and say a few words about the critical zone and what the critical zone is.
Sure. Okay.
As soon as I can.
So our workshop today is associated with a national scientific research network called the Critical Zone Network, which has been ongoing now for, I guess, about a decade, and is currently based at Penn State University. And over that time, we've been producing materials on the critical zone to help people understand what these research efforts are. And so you should, of course, be asking the question, well, wait a second, I thought this was a workshop on big ideas. Well, in fact, the critical zone is a big idea in science right now that focuses on the interrelationships among the physical layers of the Earth system, from basically the groundwater table up to the top of the canopy. And although that might kind of sound like ecology to you, you might say, well, what's different? We've always known there are connections among these different components. What's different is that this is an effort to bring researchers together who study components of the system who didn't previously talk to each other very much. So they might be everything from people that worry about water resources and aquifers and that sort of thing, to atmospheric scientists, people who think about carbon cycles and other kinds of element cycles, and of course think about the climate. So what the first thing that we'd like to do today is introduce what the critical zone is by playing for you a video that was produced by a local PBS station. And that video was made in partnership with a number of the researchers in this critical zone network. And so I'm actually, it'll take me just a minute to bring it up. And so I want to mention right off that there is an agenda for today's workshop. So let me, Ingrid, if we put that in the chat yet?
No, I can do that while you get the video set
Okay,
up.
great. So Ingrid will put the agenda into the chat, and so we're actually, because Don had to restart his computer, we're going to change the order of things slightly, and it'll take me just a moment to bring up this video.
Yeah, and I'm back, but go with the video.
Okay. Yeah. Now that we've got it, the stage set. Oh,
Right,
that.
right.
Good.
Earth is in a constant state of transformation, from large-scale disasters, both natural and man-made, to the microscopic chemical processes that control decay.
Sorry, the video started without me. I'm in the process of, okay. Sharing my screen. Sound, okay. We are ready.
Decay and decomposition. Earth is in a constant state of transformation, from large-scale disasters, both natural and man-made, to the microscopic chemical processes that control decay and decomposition. It is becoming ever more evident that our ecosystem is under increasing pressure from global change, leaving many people wondering, how will our landscapes respond? Across the country, scientists believe that we can better understand how our Earth will respond to this global pressure by studying what they call the critical zone.
The critical zone is the part of the Earth's environment in which we as humans interact.
It's where rock meets life. It's the veneer of the continental land surface that extends from the top of vegetation and the canopy down through soil and bedrock to whatever depth fresh groundwater is circulating.
We call it the zone of transformation because that's where things happen. That's where atmospheric CO2 is turned into plant material. That's where plant material is turned back into atmospheric CO2. That's where water is transformed from rainwater into groundwater and stream water. All those processes take place in the critical zone. It's a very active and dynamic zone. It's the zone where really important things happen at the Earth's surface.
It provides the food that we eat. It filters and cleans the water that we drink and provides us the oxygen that we breathe. So it's imperative to understand the critical zone.
But I think even beyond that, it's critical also to all types of life. This is where most ecosystems live that are terrestrial, life on this planet.
Here in the U.S., a network of 9 critical zone observatories, or CZOs, provide scientists with an important window through which to make key observations about the structure and function of critical zone processes. Each observatory is located on a unique landscape, from the wooded hills of the Northeast to the deserts of the Southwest and the snow-covered Rocky Mountains. Each provides scientists with another piece of the puzzle to understanding the critical zone.
The advantage of having many different critical zone observatories gives us the opportunity to look at similar processes, be they physical or chemical or biological, in different systems. So ones that are sitting on different geologies, that have different tree species associated with them, have different ecosystems as a function of that, different climates.
The observatories represent really very small portions of the landscape. And so if we want the science that we're accomplishing here to be meaningful, we have to bring that science to be applicable to larger pieces of the landscape.
Well, what we're trying to do is really understand the critical zone as a thing And we're trying to really look at it as if it's all one entity and understand all the different processes that are going on, whether it's biological, physical, geological, hydrological. And we get all sorts of people with all sorts of expertise that study different pieces of it.
Scientists at the various CZOs each bring their own unique backgrounds and skill sets to bear on common problems, working together to reach new solutions. It is work that by its very nature is interdisciplinary.
The beauty of critical zone science lies within its interdisciplinary nature. And so part of the motivation for critical zone science is in getting different disciplines talking and communicating with each other.
We often think of those sciences as being separate disciplines, and one of the things that's really nice about the Critical Zone Observatories is it gives people that study those varying disciplines a seat at the same table, so we can talk about processes that interrelate that maybe we wouldn't have known about otherwise.
We need to bring a lot of different tools to bear to understand this critical zone because it's quite a complicated system. It's not one person doing one kind of thing. It's a group of people with different tools, different sets of knowledge, working on the same system that has a lot of different facets.
You know, sometimes I think about it like the fabrics in weaving. You know, if we can, you know, what we used to do is look at the threads separately, each of us, and then we try to weave it together, but we didn't know where it went at all. Well, now we've got the threads that we're looking at separately, but it's all in the same location. We can see how they all go back together. And so now we're starting to put it back together and come up with real deep understanding that we didn't have before.
Scientists who study the critical zone are trying to better understand this system with and without the pressures of human impact.
The biggest impact I think humans have on the critical zone is the fact that we are changing our climate so significantly. By introducing carbon into the atmosphere, which is increasing temperatures, we are changing the hydrologic cycle, and in that process we're changing all of the other cycles that hinge on water as a piece of it.
Well, it turns out that more and more humans are playing a huge part. You know, obviously we're changing things globally, we're changing the climate globally, which impacts the critical zone. But we are considered the biggest geologic force on the planet now, so erosion is faster today than it has been in the geologic past, and it's really because of humans.
We as humans can only understand how we negatively impact the critical zone and the way the various linked processes of chemistry, biology, geology, and the atmosphere interact with each other if we understand how they operate without us in nature.
We need to understand how we're changing the critical zone and what that means in terms of how it changes into the future. Because, you know, we're messing it up. You know, we're pulling the threads out and changing things, and, you know, we need to understand, you know, what's important about the changes that we're making.
Increasingly, our planet is being adversely affected by humanity. And so if we're going to be able to sustain our presence on the planet, we need to reduce our impacts on these natural processes that are here and allow us to thrive.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And I am mostly back, though my computer is still running a little slow. Who can relate in here to technical problems in teaching? But I think we're in business now. So thank you all for joining us today. And my agenda is still not loading. So Rob or Ingrid, could you share screen and let me see the agenda.
Yep. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks. So, and while that's coming up, we'll be talking about what it is we want our students to walk away with from studying earth and environmental science with us. And the next, sorry. So we've seen a brief introduction to the critical zone in that very nice video, which pretty much all of the resources that we'll share today are linked from the agenda or will be linked from the agenda. So that first bullet that you see at 210 is to the page that not only has that video, but also has some related teaching resources on the critical zone. The critical zone is a great way to introduce the concepts of Earth systems. And I think I've got stuff working now, so I can share screen for the next piece talking about why we should use the critical zone as an entree to talking about Earth system science and thinking about how to build deep understandings of the Earth system. And just a quick look at some systemic issues. The climate team at the Paleontological Research Institution, where Rob Ingrid and I are, and our colleague Alex, who is on the road today and not with us, we work largely on climate and energy issues, and some of the complexities of teaching those things are that they're first off, obviously scientific issues and systemic in nature and deeply connected, but really only deeply understood with meaningful understandings of human history, economics, mathematics, psychology, sociology, and much, much more. And really climate and energy are relevant to most things that matter. And we can look at the critical zone in pretty much the same way. It's clearly a scientific issue. It's systemic in nature, deeply connected to and deeply understood with meaningful understandings, again, of human history, economics, mathematics, psychology, sociology, and so much more. And there's what I think of as kind of the iconic image of the critical zone showing from the bottom of water, the water table below the surface up to the tops of the vegetation canopy, and thinking about the interactions of all the pieces in between. And a second sort of iconic image is this one, where we look at some of the tools for studying the critical zone. And I think it's worth thinking about what discipline is this? Well, there's engineering, because we're doing all of that stuff. There's geology, obviously. There's chemistry in the rocks and in the groundwater and in the atmosphere. There's botany and ecology. There's physics. And that's all better understood through the applications of mathematics and computer science and through the lens of human history. And I will click there. I'm clicking the wrong thing. And only shareable through language, mathematics, and art. And so when we think about what discipline is this, well, it's pretty near all of them. So it should either be taught in all courses or lead to a fundamentally new structure for education. And that is one way of looking at some of the issues here. And let's see if my agenda has finally loaded. Maybe. Answer no, doesn't look like it. Click that reload button again. Here we come. That is better. Okay. The sort of the big question for today is this right here. If students remember and understand only one scientific idea taught in my class 20 years after they're done being my students, I want them to understand this. And I'm going to have you, there's a link down on the bottom of the second, or at the top of the second page rather, to respond to a poll for that. But before you respond to the poll that's asking that one question, test your idea to see if it's an idea by saying it aloud in this sentence, hey, I have an idea, and then fill in your idea. If it makes sense, then you've got an idea. If it doesn't sound natural when you say it, like, hey, I've got an idea, human impacts. That doesn't exactly sound like an idea. That's a topic. And unfortunately, the disciplinary core ideas in the next generation science standards fail that test. They're topics, not ideas. And I'll also note that I was part of the Earth and Space Science design team for the frameworks for the NGSS, or that led to the NGSS. And we were frustrated that we handed up ideas and the larger committee brought back topics instead, though there are some very, very rich and useful ideas within the NGSS and within the framework for science education. But make sure your idea is an idea before plugging it in there, and the link is right there. And Rob, if somebody wants to put that in the chat, that'd be great. And that should then
it's there. So yeah, if you're looking for the link, it's just in the chat.
Great. And that should start to appear here. And take just a minute. I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully have my computer cooperate and be able to share some of the ideas that you're plugging in there. And it's 2:21 right now. I'm gonna say till 2:23 we'll let you plug in there. And if you want to put in more than one, go ahead and put in more than one.
If you're just joining us, we are doing a poll right now, and the link for the poll is in the chat, the last item in the chat.
Great ideas coming in.
And also, if you don't have a link to the agenda, I will add that to the agenda now. Anne asks, can we answer more than once? And I think, Don, you said yes.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll share screen and let you see them roll in, and then we'll scroll back through some of these. And let's scroll through them a little faster now. There's interdependency in nature. We need to take care of the 4 spheres for our species to survive. The nature of science is interdisciplinary. If I want my children to enjoy the outdoor activities, I need to make sure that everyone, including businesses, acts to protect the planet, that they have a continuing wonder of nature and desire to learn and go deeper. Human actions affect the Earth's ability to sustain human life. Humans have caused climate change in the last approximately 150 years, mostly by burning fossil fuels, and humans can change this. We all impact the world around us, hopefully in a positive way. Some very nice ideas there. And I believe I can make these responses available to everybody. And I'll put a link into the agenda for that after the workshop's over. That's, I think, a very good set of ideas that we've got so far. And let me get back to the agenda. I can finally access. Now I want to flip over to a Prezi and talk a little bit about some of the key ideas here. Screen and shrink you all down. And I will, this link isn't in the agenda yet, but I will add it. And was put together with some funding from the National Science Foundation. And basically what we're after today is thinking about the most important ideas to understand about the Earth system. And we've actually already done some of this, but one of the things that sort of fuels my thinking related to this is a quote from someone that I worked with in grad school at Michigan State, Don Weinshank, who coordinated the intro computer science courses class for everyone at Michigan State. So 40,000 students went through this, and he supervised the grad students who taught it. And a mantra of his was that 90% of your students will forget 90% of the content of your class within 90 days of finishing your class. And I think that little pithy sentence sums up an awful lot of educational research pretty succinctly. And it's got a couple of implications. Whoops, why is that? Come on. Back to where we were here. So two implications from that are maybe we ought to do things fundamentally differently, and we should think very, very carefully about the 10% that they do hold on to, and that's kind of the key idea of today, and we've just done that. And it's worth noting that there's been a lot of people thinking about questions like this for a very long time. And in recent decades, that's yielded a number of sets of essential principles about Earth system science from various perspectives. The ocean literacy principles include 7 essential principles and 44 fundamental concepts. The essential principles and fundamental concepts for atmospheric literacy include 7 essential principles and 33 fundamental concepts. The big ideas for Earth science include 9 big ideas and 75 supporting concepts. The climate literacy principles include 8 essential principles and 46 fundamental concepts. The energy literacy essential principles include 7 essential principles and 49 fundamental concepts. And there are other initiatives as well. And if we just look at those 5, we end up with a total of 38 essential principles and 247 fundamental concepts. And that doesn't include the North American Association for Environmental Education Guidelines for Excellence or the disciplinary core ideas from the next generation's science standards. And it makes me wonder if we understand the meaning of the word fundamental. And I had stuff on top of the top. So we've got almost 250 fundamental concepts, and we've got 180 days of instruction or thereabouts around the country. And I say good luck with that. And the NGSS sort of helps, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But I think generally the big ideas simply aren't big enough. It's obviously ridiculous for an Earth or environmental science teacher to cover 250 fundamental concepts in the course of a year. But that's not to say that these initiatives aren't important. They represent a consensus view of the most important Earth system science concepts, but we don't have any examples of creating a description of what everyone should understand about any topic that has led to wide swaths of the population understanding the target content, in spite of the countless attempts to do just that throughout human history. We don't have a single one.
Hey, Don.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but there was a question in the chat about the essential principles.
Yep. Can you read it to me?
Yeah, it says, are these essential principles that you are referring to from the next generation science standards?
They mostly preceded the next generation science standards, and were used to inform the development of the next generation science standards. And I was involved with both the climate and the energy principles, which was part of the reason that I was asked to be part of the design team, the Earth and Space Science design team for the NGSS. So the NGSS sort of tries to bring that into the design of the NGSS. So that's what I'm saying. There we go again. Stop that. Two. Just clicking. And apologies if I'm making anybody motion sick. So that's a great question. And they're still out there. Most of them, the climate and energy ones, have both recently been updated, and the ocean science principles were updated, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So they're still informing what people are doing, and they did inform the design of the NGSS. So we need to think about the realities of school, including at the college and university level. And these principles target commencement level, high school commencement level expectations. And the majority of high school earth science teachers in this country are in just 4 states, with New York having the largest piece of that pie. Physics, chemistry, and biology have dominated the high school science curriculum for over 100 years. And if Earth system science is taught, astronomy is usually included in the same 1-year course. So that's an awful lot to do. And we're working to, of course, the NGSS sort of elevates Earth science to the same level of importance as physical and life science. But it's important to remember that the 1994 or 96 National Science Education Standards did that too, and didn't really much impact how much high school earth science is taught. So thinking about one of the driving ideas here is that we need a coherent conceptual framework to remember stuff. There we go again. I hate that. Sorry. Let me get to the right place again. I don't think we used to have these problems. It's a rough day, people. I hope you're okay with me. A key idea in research on how people learn is that in order to develop competence in an area of inquiry, students have to have a deep foundation of factual knowledge, understand those facts, ideas in the context of a conceptual framework, and organize knowledge in ways that facilitate retrieval and application. And that's what we're trying to do here today. And I think if we think about how to teach a few profound ideas, but taught them really deeply, we have a much better chance of students holding on to those ideas. That requires knowledge of all or most of the literacy principles and connects them together in ways that are hopefully going to build the likelihood of true understanding and retention for the long haul. So what makes an idea really big? Well, the idea should cut across the entire earth or environmental science curriculum. Understanding of it should be reasonably attainable by students, and the understanding hold promise for retention. And the idea should be essential to understanding a variety of topics. And the idea requires uncoverage. It has a bottomless quality. And we ought to have the entire earth science or environmental science curriculum represented in a small set of ideas. That's what we're after. So I want to stop and discuss and put you into breakout groups for that. We have 51 participants today. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and get you off into breakout groups in a moment. We'll put you into 6. And I'm going to give us a moment before we open those up and give you a little bit more direction before we go. Let me go back to screen sharing. So in the agenda, we have got Jamboards. I've created 6 breakout groups that I'll start up in a minute. Oh, and before we do that, I want to take another look at another example from E.O. Wilson and Jim Watson talking about biology's big ideas. And that is here. And start
blending. It was discrete.
Actually, Darwin, the one place he fumbled, that is, he couldn't really come up with anything solid, was in heredity. It's true.
He didn't understand he understood it had to happen, but he didn't know quite why.
He didn't even have Mendel to look to.
Yes.
But let me put it this way. I don't want to start going off on a tangent, but it is relevant to this. The way I see it is that modern biology now has pretty well established 2 laws. I think, at the level you could almost call laws, or basic, well-established principles for which there is no known exception. The first is that all organic process, all living process and elements are ultimately obedient to the laws of physics and chemistry. Now, that was an extremely important step, to finally get established so we could start testing it. The second law is that all living systems and process evolved by natural selection. And that, in a nutshell, is modern biology. Jim can disagree if he wants to, but that's the way I see it. I think if we were to teach biology from the top down, starting with those 2 laws, we would have and show what the evidence is and what it's created, we would have a lot less problems with controversies over biology.
You mean in terms of what we have? What controversies are you speaking to?
Well, specifically on the right, so to speak, a disbelief that evolution even occurs or that it must be guided.
So I think that's a nice. Oops, and I didn't mean to stop sharing. Jeez. I think that's a nice pair of big ideas for biology, and I think they're right that if we framed our ideas like that for biology, we might have some more success. And we actually, it's important to note too that understandings about evolution have improved actually a fair amount in the last decade or so. And I think that's good news that a lot of people don't know. I've set up 6 breakout groups and it's 2:38, so we're actually pretty much on time. I'm going to let you go into those groups for up until 2:50 Eastern Daylight Time. So that'll give you 12 minutes, which is not enough time to finish the activity, but it's enough time to start a good conversation and share some ideas. So in those different breakout groups, you've got a set of Jamboards that are linked from the agenda. So whichever group you get sent to, go to the matching number of Jamboard in the agenda and click on that. And it has instructions that look like this. So share your ideas, sharpen the ideas, see if you can narrow them down, and be prepared to share in 11 minutes. And if you need to add more pages to the Jamboards, you can do that by just clicking that sideways caret there. I'm going to go ahead and open up all the rooms, and you should start shifting into those rooms and have at it. Okay, I think everybody should be back now. Welcome, welcome. I want to just hear very quickly from the different groups, and I can share screens and have asked folks to somebody from room 1 to unmute themselves and say a little bit about what you talked about. And that's Allison, Candace, Christina, Gretchen, JR, Kathy, Rebecca, Susan, and Tracy. Can one of you unmute yourself and say a word or two about what you talked about?
All right, this is Kathy. I can do that. Some of our sticky notes here are: the Earth consists of several interconnected natural and human created systems. We felt that going to the next bullet point was also cross-curricular. Well, that's cross-curricular, which then led to the fact or the hope that that understanding of that idea would, because it's cross-curricular and because of what it is, that would lead to hopefully a promise for retention. And then same with the pink ones on the other side: humans impact the Earth systems in positive and negative ways. Or, we said it 2 ways: humans impact the Earth system and the Earth system impacts humans. And that certainly can be taught cross-curricularly with a way to hold retention.
Great.
And anybody can feel free to jump in here to help me out, my group. But
a good vibe, and since we've got a bunch of folks, we'll go off to room 2, which is Amanda, Anna, Debbie, Emily, Keaton, Chris, Lauren, Nadezhda, and Tammy. One of you unmute yourself and say a little bit about what you all talked about. And if not, we can just kind of take a look at it.
I kind of love all science should be Earth science.
Yeah, me too. Yes. Okay.
Sorry, it's Chris. We didn't necessarily have a discussion. We wanted to make use of our 10 minutes. So what we did was we all just kind of fired sticky notes on there and then grouped them. So it looked like the common trend amongst us, though, is like the focus is really on those 4 systems. The fact that everything is connected, it shouldn't be separated into one thing versus something else. Like science is approached, and we create like these dividing lines. And I think the idea is that those dividing lines need to disappear so we can look at things holistically. And I think that's just where everything is headed. So
yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Great, thank you. Okay, group 3 is Barbara, Daniel, Emily, Helene, Christine, and Laura. And could one of you say a word? Looks like
I think we just kind of had the same as the last 2 groups, just the idea of this interconnectedness and materials being recycled over and over again, and these different spheres interacting with each other. Basically the same as the other 2 groups.
Okay, great.
Can I say something about the last groups? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They had one idea on there that the idea that all systems support life on Earth, that green one. I just want to say, I think that's a really, really, really important idea, especially when we're going to be, we're teaching young kids that in understanding these systems allows us to exist in these systems. So I just wanted to say that about that one.
Yeah, thanks. And so let's see, we're on 4 now, is that right? Yes. And 4 is Anne, Ingrid, Joel, Kelly, Linda, and Matt and Robert.
Well, we wanted to, again, find some ideas that would cut across all of these different spheres. And we started way back with evolution, but mostly we just put in things that we thought were important for our students to understand. And they're fairly simple. Water connects us all, conservation, matter, energy change. Science is dynamic. inorganic or organic materials interact to sustain life, and all matter and energy come from stars. So these are all big ideas that in the amount of time we have, it's hard to really make them cohesive. Yeah.
I know I did. I know I only gave you time to start the conversation, not to finish it. It's a conversation I've been having for over 30 years now, so it's one that goes for a while. Room 5 was Anna, Beth, Bing, Linda, Melanie, Michelle, Rob, and Robin. And here is their Jamboard. If somebody wants to speak up, that'd be great.
This is Anna.
Hi, Anna. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. We kind of had something similar, I think, to a lot of the other groups. There seems to be a trend here. But just this idea that kind of students need to realize that everything is interconnected and that they have an impact on the earth every day, and their actions have an effect on things. And so we kind of just put into ideas of like, how do we get students to transfer that into their everyday actions through, small things like, can you, ride your bike instead of driving somewhere, and understanding sort of what actions affects the earth and processes involved in that.
Great. Okay, and last but not least, room 6, which is Alexis, Jenny, John, Lydia, and Simran. They have a somewhat different looking presentation here.
I guess I can speak about this.
Yeah, go for it.
We kind of started out with one main idea in the middle, this interdependency in nature and the interconnection of all of Earth systems. And we decided to kind of build a concept map off of that, connecting some of these other big ideas to that one central idea. Of course, all the time thinking about the 4 spheres. So you can see some of our other thoughts about changing a part of a system changes other parts of the system, human impacts, and we wanted to make sure students saw that there was still hope and that changes can be mitigated with other changes and so forth. And so we just kind of did a concept map around many of the same sorts of ideas that other groups have had.
Yeah, I don't remember any other groups talking about this one to learn.
Okay.
I just added that in parentheses, like it connected to the group 3 about all systems affect life. So if something happens to the hydrosphere, biosphere, like we can learn from historical events and major extinction events that can have a really profound impact.
Great. And I'll note too, a couple of things that were in the chat that I didn't respond to that I have changed the share settings on the worksheet, which was just an FYI kind of thing that has a lot of the stuff that we've said, but written down. And I will share the Prezi after the reveal, which will come up in a minute or two here. I think that's where I'm going back to next here. But let me make sure I'm on track. Yes, yeah. So picking up here, get some things out of the way. And go to where we left off. Which I think was right about here. And some of the things to follow up the discussion where you've had in your individual groups is to plant the seed of how can a huge set of ideas, like the set of sets that we looked at before you went out into breakout groups, how can that be helpful in designing and teaching our courses? And I think a very, very useful exercise is to actually talk to your former students and to ask them what they think the most important ideas are from your courses. That can be really revealing. I've done that. I've been both a high school and college level teacher, and it's sometimes a depressing exercise, but I think it can be both depressing and powerful. And sometimes it's not depressing. Sometimes they walked away with the kinds of things we've been talking about. But for the New York State teachers, a very common answer is when you ask a student after they've completed taking the Regents Earth Science course, what the most important idea of the course was, they may well say you can look it up in the reference tables, which is kind of important for certain things, but it's not really an answer that meshes very much with the kinds of things that people were just talking about. So I really do urge you to go and talk to those folks and your former students and see what they think. And when you go back to school in the fall, you know, ask some of your former students who are walking down the hall what the most valuable thing from your course is that they've held on to. And if you're in touch with your graduates who some of my former high school students are now grandparents, which warps my brain, but some of them actually held on to the kinds of things I would hope for. Let's take a look at our big ideas. That is our set there, which we developed over the course of many years, talking with scientists and educators about what they think are the most important things for every American to understand, every high school graduate to understand about the Earth system. And this is what we came up with. The Earth is a system of systems. The flow of energy drives the cycling of matter. Life, including human life, influences and is influenced by the environment. Physical and chemical principles are unchanging and drive both gradual and rapid changes in the Earth system. And to understand deep space and time, models and maps are necessary. And I'll also emphasize, I think the first one, Earth is a system of systems, and understanding the aspects of the nature of, you know, to use a technical term, complex adaptive systems, which we've used in some places to state that idea, to say that the Earth is a complex adaptive system, which has a specific meaning in the scientific literature. But basically, from the discussions, I think at least most folks have a sense of what that means. But that idea of understanding scale, I don't think we pay enough attention to. And humans have a really, really hard time wrapping their heads around the difference between 1,000, a million, a billion, and a trillion. And I honestly think the world would be a better place if more people understood that more deeply. And I also think that, you know, there's good reason that we don't. And one way of thinking about that is that I just turned 59 a couple of weeks ago. And before I was born, almost no one needed to understand the difference between 1,000, a million, a billion, and a trillion. But now, in my opinion, virtually everyone does, because it informs so much about climate and energy and economics and poverty, and the list is very, very long. What we could do better if we better understood the scale of space and time, and scale just writ large. And I also want to make sure that we don't forget to pay attention to the questions at the top there, the overarching questions of how do we know what we know, and how does what we know inform our decision making. I think if folks graduated from high school with a deep understanding of those questions and these ideas, we'd be doing better. And I think there are ways that we can do that by, you know, many of you talked about the understanding of needing to have a more interdisciplinary approach. And I think that is fundamental to getting better understandings here. And there are some simple things that you can do, like putting up a poster of these ideas, or one poster for each idea and one poster for the questions, and just point to it every time it comes up, so that they're more likely to, through repeated exposure and seeing the ideas in different contexts, get a deeper idea of what that's all about. Now I'm just going to quickly fly through how these ideas compare to the literacy principles. And a favorite quote that's relevant here is, "I have yet to see any problem, however complicated, which when you looked at it in the right way did not become still more complicated." And that is true of thinking about the different things that scientists and educators want people to understand by the time they graduate from high school. And this is putting those different literacy principles together with the NGSS 3 dimensions and color coding them to our 5 ideas. And so when you see that red in the chart, that means that it's talking about Earth system science. When you see yellow, it's talking about the impacts of life and so forth. And we'll quickly fly through just a little bit and give a nod to the North American Association for Environmental Education standards as well. And we'll take a look at one big idea in a little bit more depth and see where it plays out across the sets of different principles. And that's the Earth as a system of systems. And we also have paragraph length descriptions of each of the big ideas here. And again, I'll put the I'll add the Prezi to the agenda after we go through this bit. So stating it at a paragraph level, I'll go ahead and read that. The Earth is a system, the Earth system is composed of and part of a multitude of systems which cycle and interact, resulting in dynamic equilibrium, though the system evolves. The Earth is also nested in larger systems, including the solar system and the universe. However, there is an inherent unpredictability in systems which are composed of an effectively infinite number of interacting parts that follow simple rules. Each system is qualitatively different from, but not necessarily greater than, the sum of its parts. And that paragraph is written at a commencement level of understanding, or maybe actually a little bit too high a level. Maybe it's a college level understanding. But let's look at where that systems understanding plays out across the different places. It's in the cross-cutting concepts and systems and models and patterns and in cause and effect and structure and function. You can see it kind of all over the place. It's in the Earth and space science core ideas, in obviously the Earth systems and Earth and human activity and Earth's place in the universe. And it shows up in the ocean literacy principles, in that the ocean is a major influence on weather and climate, and in the climate literacy principles, climate is regulated by complex interactions among other components of the Earth system, and life on Earth depends on, has been shaped by, and affects climate, and climate change will have consequences for Earth systems and human lives. And in the atmosphere, the atmosphere principles, there we go. The Earth's atmosphere continuously interacts with other components of the Earth system, and it shows up in the, I think this is the Earth science principles. The Earth is a complex system of interacting rock, water, air, and life. And I'll note Rob was involved in the crafting of those principles, so I was not. The energy principles, physical processes on Earth are the result of energy flow through the Earth system, and biological processes depend on energy flow through the Earth system. And you can kind of follow through any one of the big ideas by looking for those colors. And another one here in the energy principles: energy decisions are influenced by economic, political, environmental, and social factors. And I'm not going to go into the NAAE ones, but I will open it up for questions and discussions on our big ideas. Flip back over to the agenda. which has some links there. If you want to raise your hand, I'm going to stop sharing, and folks can raise their hand and or put stuff in the chat, which I'll follow along a little bit more closely. And Simran has.
Hi, Simran. Thank you, Don. I really appreciated you sharing those resources and discussing in the breakout room. So I lead like content team meetings for my school. I'm my 8th grade science teacher. But that document you just shared with us, it would be a great resource for school teams. Is there like a document version?
Yes.
Besides the Prezi, could you share that with us? I didn't see it in the agenda, but maybe it's there. Because I think you sent us the link to all the separate principles, but the one that you just compiled.
Yeah, that is, I think there's a link in the agenda. Let me flip over to the agenda again. It is here. So you will find it there. And I will put the link to the Prezi. For whatever reason, the share button is not working on the Prezi at the moment, but I will definitely add it to the, maybe I just need to reload the document to get it there. I see Lydia put in a comment that her kids did something similar to John's, which I need to scroll back up for, but other questions, thoughts, ideas on how to bring this to your classroom. If it doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment or a thought, or telling me that telling us that we're crazy for thinking such things. And if we don't have questions or comments, I think I'm going to hand it off to Rob to talk about the biggest challenges facing society today. Before I do that, let me make sure that I say aloud that if on the registration form you asked for a certificate of attendance, we'll get those to you within a week of when we finish in 15 or 20 minutes or so. And if you realize you'd like one now, you can email me.
And Don, I should mention that I also did leave a blank in the exit survey for such a thing.
Okay, great. And we do have Zoom produces reports where we can see who's here and compare that to the list of people who requested those certificates. And I'm going to hand it off to Rob for talking about
this little topic. You said that so casually.
Yes.
Rob's just going to talk about the biggest issues facing humanity. So I'm not going to talk about it so much as ask you. And this is something that I do with my students. And it may seem kind of absurd at the surface, but I think it generates really good discussions, even if you really can't come up with a solution, of course. But so here's my question for you. And I didn't create a nice poll like Don did, so I want you to just put this in the chat. I want you to take a minute or a couple minutes if you need to ponder what is the biggest issue, challenge facing humanity in the 21st century. So boil it down to one thing if you can, and pop that into the chat. Now, keep in mind, this is especially appropriate for your students because this is basically the lifetime of your students. I'm just going to be quiet for a minute or two, and we won't go into breakout groups or anything.
good ideas going.
There are 48 people, so there should be 40 some responses.
So hard to come up with just one.
Yeah, yes. And of course, if you were doing this in your classroom, you might have your students think about it, but instead of everybody writing, one down and turning it in, you might have somebody suggest one, and then there can be another one and another one, and then they can kind of grow on each other. But that we could take the next half hour with that. So this is a simpler way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to, you can look for yourself in the chat, but I'm also going to just pop some of these into a PowerPoint. Let's see here. No, I changed my mind. Having pasted into the PowerPoint, I realize it'll take me a couple minutes just to format it. So let's just go down what we have here. So we have climate change, science denial, interesting, overconsumption of resources / fossil fuels. Now this may be biased by the people we happen to have in this meeting. I wonder if we asked a different group of teachers if they would come up with a different set. But climate change, human population growth, habitat destruction, human-caused climate change and loss of biodiversity, climate change, money, loss of connection to the natural world, attitudes, climate change, it comes up over and over, understanding cause and effect of life, interesting, untapped potential of renewable energy, a lot going back to climate change and energy. And so here's what I want you to do now is think about for a minute, how are these, to what degree are these connected to earth science? That is a kind of a no-brainer for the people on this call, but for your students, they might have to think for a moment about some of them. So I'm just gonna say, like, climate change, well, okay, obviously. How about the others? And so at this point, I'm just gonna ask people to like raise their hands and say, if you didn't pick climate change, you picked something else, can you relate to that thing to earth science? I see Simran nodding her head.
I think they all relate. I mean, I thought of mine related to climate change for sure.
Yeah.
Overconsumption of resources.
Okay. So keep going with that. How is that connected to earth science?
I think with all the cycles and systems we talked about, like when when you're adding more carbon in the atmosphere, when you're destroying Earth's forests, like all of that is contributing. So it ties into the big idea of systems connected to other systems, and how everything's related to life on Earth.
Yeah, okay. And so research, basically everything ultimately comes from the Earth, right? I mean, everything we use, I guess except maybe what comes out of the atmosphere, but that's obviously an Earth system. So everything comes from the Earth. And so if we're using it, then there's, for most things, some finite amount. How about loss of connection to the natural world? Is that connected to earth science?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
I mean, if we just keep going the way we're doing by relying on technology in many different ways, then we are, in my opinion, then what we do is we don't realize, or we forget where those resources come from. We forget about how time works. Don was saying, the difference between 1,000, million, 10,000, all that. We just think things come so quickly. So, I mean, I can go
you
on.
Can go on and on, right? Yeah.
So
the natural world, of course, is the purview of Earth system science. But I think often we don't, people, I suspect somebody from the general public might say, think of the natural world as being like plants, which of course are obviously part of the Earth system.
Yeah.
But they might not think about connection to, is sort of going back to what Simran was saying.
Yeah.
That the resources actually have to come from someplace ultimately.
Yep.
Okay, how about this one? Money talks. Is that related to Earth science?
I wrote that one. I was just thinking that, people have good intentions and everything, but as we've seen with like higher gas prices,
Okay,
maybe will change people's thoughts if they get hit where it counts.
So you went straight to gas. I don't know if that was an accident or just the first thing that popped into your head, but obviously gas is an Earth resource, right? And
can I say something else about that?
Please.
Because also, money influences, right? So all the people who are wanting to exploit resources and things, they are influencing politics, the media, and all these other things that are influencing people. So that's related to Earth science because they're the somewhat exploiters of resources that then translate into some of these water and climate problems.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So there's this next step that, it connects back to basically finite amounts and making money on what those things are. So now I just have a couple more minutes. So where I want to go with this now is I'm going to share screen. And here are Don's 5 big ideas. Would it be possible in thinking about, okay, so all those things are connected to Earth science. Can we connect them? Is there any one big idea here? Here, I'm going to change the title of this. Is there any one idea here that connects to those? Or would you say, like, do you have to understand one of these or more of these in order to address these huge challenges? So I guess, again, I'll just ask you, I think I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you. Anybody, I see Anne has her hand up.
So what I would say is that they all do, but unless you accept the third one, none of the others matter. If you can't accept that we have an influence on the Earth and the Earth have an influence on us, getting the others won't help you understand and affect those challenges.
Interesting. Okay. Yes. Right. And does anybody want to have a different idea? Push back on that, or say there's something else that if students don't understand this idea, we'll never be able to face these, or not just students, but public. Because some of you were talking about scale, or Don brought up the idea of scale. And it kind of seems like one of the big barriers to understanding things like climate change, or maybe even the whole idea that humans would impact the Earth, is partially a question of scale. And so it doesn't say, none of these big ideas specifically say scale, but one of them says to understand deep time, and actually it does say scale, and the scale of space, models and maps are necessary. And of course, I think we started this with early on when Don was asking for big ideas, the connectedness of everything. And the first one is the Earth is a system of systems. So again, that kind of gets at understanding human impact is also understanding system of systems. Okay, so I've used up the little bit of time that I had, but the take home point here, the big idea about these big ideas, is that there are a handful of concepts that are necessary for addressing the greatest challenges that humanity faces, all of which are related in one way or another to earth science. Don, I'll hand it back to you. I guess part of what we have left is the exit survey.
Yeah, and I'll just, well, a couple of thoughts before heading to the exit surveys. Towards the bottom of the document is the paragraph level descriptions of the earth science big ideas. And I'll note that the phrasing of the model's big idea, and this actually has sort of 3 scales of statement, just a one-word label, the sentence length description, and then a paragraph level description. And the model's paragraph is my favorite one of those, and I'm just going to read that because I like it, and I think it connects to a lot of the things we were just talking about. The use of models is fundamental to all of the earth sciences. Maps and models aid in the understanding of aspects of the earth systems for which direct observation is not possible. Models assist in the comprehension of time and space at both immense and submicroscopic scales. When compared to the size and age of the universe, humanity is a speck in space and a blip in time, which is maybe a little bit inspired by Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot essay. But I think that's a hugely important and difficult concept to comprehend. And just a couple of other things I want to mention too is, this is, for one thing, and let me flip back to the agenda again. This is the first in a series of 4 workshops, and those are all listed at the end of the agenda. So on July 14th, we'll be talking about carbon in the critical zone. On August 4th, we'll be talking about water in the critical zone. And on August 11th, we'll be talking about climate change in the critical zone. And the links for registration are all there. I'll also point you to we've got an educator newsletter that you can click to see the summer issue there, where we announced these workshops, and that ended up being picked up by NSTA, which is very much appreciated. And you can subscribe directly to it there, where we announce all of our workshops. And the newsletter comes out 5 times a year, a summer issue and 4 during the course of the year. And a few weeks after each one of those, we do a free online workshop like this one. For the summer one, we're doing 4, thanks to support from Penn State and the Critical Zone Network. Just one closely related thing is in the summer newsletter, the lead story is about the Cornell University Borehole Observatory, which is Cornell's effort, a step in Cornell's effort to heat the campus with geothermal heat. And currently heat takes up almost half of the Ithaca campus's energy use, about 300 buildings on campus. And there's the potential to heat that with without fuel. Right now it's heated by a combined heat and power plant. On campus, it's powered by natural gas, and we're looking to swap that out for pumping cold water down one hole in a few pairs of holes and getting hot water back up from a nearby hole, and using that to heat campus. And that hole is going to be about 2 miles deep. And that's very exciting and connects to a whole lot of the issues we've talked about today. And Rob, do you want to say a word about the feedback form, which I'll click on the link and open that up so you can see what
sure. It's short, so don't worry about spending lots and lots of time on it. And it's anonymous if you want it to be. So basically it just says, do you use or how would you use big ideas in your curriculum? How would you change this workshop if we ran it again? How did you know about the workshop? And if you would like a certificate of participation, please leave your name and email.
And thank you all.
Yeah.
And we can stay.